Very good afternoon, and thank you so much for your patience, and welcome to today's uLaw webinar. The webinar topic for today is contact management, where we're really going to highlight specific topics around how a law office should manage its clients, its contact information, really talk about the different components of a client intake process for that law firm. We're going to try and talk about some of the law society documents that are going to be required by your law firm to produce as part of this process, and the different options that you have given today's day and age and technology of how you can manage the client intake process through various devices as well as various means of intake, whether that's using a mobile phone, whether it's taking the client intake right at your office, over the phone. We're going to certainly cover the important components, if you will, of a client intake process, the pieces of information that you need to capture during the client intake process, and some of the compliance components of what that contact management and client intake process entails. Okay? How do you manage this effectively? How do you ensure that you do the conflict search? So it's very important when you start a client intake process, really, the most important component is that when you do that process, you're also doing the conflict screening, which gives you relevant information about conflicts with regards to any parties that may be involved with that specific client. If you have come across that client, let's say, in a totally different matter, if you've associated those contacts or client information as additional parties in a totally different matter, even if you've come across that client information as just as a part of description in a docket. So maybe you just had a quick conversation with an individual who is a witness in a particular matter, and you may have taken that in your notes. So the conflict search that is expected out of the Law Society emphasizes that you do a complete and thorough check of every touch point that you possibly can to ensure that you make an informed decision of that conflict search. Okay? We're certainly going to talk about some of the practice management protocols in terms of how you manage these clients, how easy it is to retrieve specific information regarding a client or contact, and how easy it is to enter the data into a system rather than maintaining this on a manual basis, the advantages that a system provides to you as a law firm. Okay? A big part of today's presentation is going to be mostly me jumping between using uLaw as an example of a system that's going to be used to walk you through the process, as well as jumping into my mobile share, which allows me to walk you through the product in an app. I'm going to see if I have the time to be able to shift between these two, but I certainly will try my best to do that. I'm just going to allow a few more of our friends to join in. And there you go. So I'm going to quickly log in into my uLaw system, and I'm just going to be using the uLawPractice as an example of how I can walk you through this whole client intake process, as well as giving you an overview of how it corresponds and connects with the app as an experience. So I've just logged in into a practice account or a fictitious legal firm or law firm account for Audit Process. I'm going through the two-factor authorization that gives me, of course, the security aspect to accessing my information, which is very critical as a law firm. And once I've validated that, I should be really good to go. And what you see here is the dashboard of our uLawPractice for this particular legal firm, Roger Practice. And one of the first steps that this particular law firm would do, and we're going to skip the whole dashboard component of it. The first thing really is to be able to do that simple client intake, okay? And to do that, we're going to use the contacts panel. Of course, this is how it's done within the uLaw system. Of course, each and every practice management system that you explore the use of has its own ways of data entry, because there's always a learning curve with any system. But once you understand how your specific choice of system works, then it's really figuring out the best practices that you can include in making that system work in its most best manner for your specific firm. So one of the first steps that you would do as part of the client intake is, let's assume a process. The first step is someone gives you a call. Of course, today in day and age, you're going to be doing a lot of marketing, digital marketing. You may actually leave your number. Someone may actually just give you a call. If you do have a full-fledged web browser system available, it's going to be a very simple process to type in basic information, I'm just going to enter first name, last name. Let me use something that I already have in my system so it's easier for you to track. A source of contact. Now, the source of contact is a piece of information that is very meaningful both from a marketing standpoint as well as the standpoint of a law society document, which really wants to make sure that you're just not a referral firm, that you're actually having a variety of sources, and that you're actually a legal firm that's serving the needs of your client. So let's say I go ahead and say it's an employee referral. Someone has indicated that, of course, my system is not working, so hopefully this helps. It's been one of those days. So here I go. I've actually entered the name Henry Gonzalez as the name. Let me change the salutation. I've given it a source of contact. It's really, how did this client, Henry, get to know me as a legal firm? You could choose from a list. You can add to this list. And let's say this was a marketing program. You can add LinkedIn. You can add Yahoo, whatever you like. I'm just going to go ahead and say it was a personal referral. And you could use the notes section really to say, referred by classmate Robin. Okay, some added information. And then you're capturing the address information if you have that at that particular time. So I'm going to say 123 Water Street, City of Ottawa, Ontario. And this is important for you to capture a mailing address. Sometimes at that particular time of intake, you may only have a single address. Once the client does walk into your office at a later time, or in today's day and context, gives you more information over the phone, or even this could be information that you capture right on your website, right? So this may just come in as a website form to your email. So it just makes it easier for you to copy-paste that information onto the client intake form. We are, of course, working on a few enhancements where you can connect your website with this client intake form, but of course we'll have to ensure that the security concerns are taken care of, and that's something we're working on right now. So hopefully in the next 2 to 3 months, we would be giving our clients the ability to be able to take web forms and then directly relate it to as a client intake right within uLaw. But for now, you can have the choice of choosing a work or a home, choosing the mailing address, adding a phone number or a contact number, and then you're going to click Save. So basic first name, last name, a source of contact, a correspondence address, and if you have their phone number at that particular time, is all that is needed to be able to create this client, Henry Gonzalez. Okay, so the first step of doing a client intake is done. Now, before you move forward to actually creating a matter, which is really the logical next step, is you create a file, you're able to, work towards representing them, signing the retainer agreement, and all of that. One of the most fundamental steps that you take as a law firm is the ability for you to do what is called as the conflict check. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and run varieties of conflict checks. I'm going to say, if I leave this empty, we have more than 4 different options that we provide. Each system would provide you with various options. And let's say we're going to go ahead and say I'm going to really look for if I've ever created a matter for someone like Henry Gonzalez. Have I ever come across, even in a docket, as I said, if maybe Henry was a witness and I had taken down as notes, do I even capture all of that information? Okay? And what the system does is that it generates a document that you can then review to make sure that you're making an informed decision. Of course, you as the legal representative, the lawyer, the paralegal, the law firm, would have to make an informed decision, of course, of whether you want to go ahead and represent if there's actually a conflict or not. What the system provides and what you should expect for any system to provide you is with that piece of information as to the various different places where you've touched upon this name across your firm, especially if you're coming from, let's say, a different organization and you're bringing some clients over. It's very important that when you use a system, a software, or any other piece of automation system, that you bring that information over, because that is going to be very important and informative in helping provide a more detailed report of this conflict check. Okay? Now, the power of the cloud, of course, this is a test database, and it is taking the time because of some of the internet issues that I'm having right now. But we'll wait for that conflict screening document to be available, and there it is as we speak. Okay. So you can clearly see that the name Henry has been, of course, emphasized quite a bit within the system. You see a Henry Rodriguez, you see a horsepower. You're also able to see a few matters. So there's actually a matter which says Henry, which is Brad tenant eviction, 181958. Okay. So how do you do the further due diligence from here? One of the easiest and simplest way to do that is to be able to actually go ahead and search for all matter information or specific matter information that the conflict screening report reported back to you. So let's say I'm going to search for the word Henry. One of the first things that you would do based on the information that the system has just provided is search up all the client matter file information, whether that's active, closed, archived. Of course, this is a good way of categorizing all of your client matter files. But if you don't necessarily have that, and you want to choose all matters, you can feel free to do that as well. Okay? So let me go ahead and choose all matters, because maybe so happened that we've closed that specific matter. Let me look at that report one more time. It was 181958. Okay. And there you go. So you've actually got the Henry versus Brad tenant eviction matter. Click on it. You're going to do some further due diligence. to make sure that, of course, you can see this is an archived matter. So this is very important for you to keep in mind. Even if you have files that you've dealt with in the past, even if you have clients that you've dealt with in the past, it's important that you bring all that information over so that it helps provide more meat to that conflict search report, okay? Even if this is a few years old, it's important that you bring that information over. That's why you're able to check out even on archived matters. And what's important and critical is such a report, such as this conflict search report, gives you the information as to when this particular report was generated. So you can clearly see that this conflict search report was generated on the 17th, that is today. So as of today, here are all the specific names. We also bring in name that sounds like, so you have a Speedy Gonzalez, you have a Toby Henry, which sounds like the first name Henry, okay? So this is really the first step. So you've done the client intake, and now you've got the conflict search done. Now really the next step in the process is to be able to go create that file. So we're going to go through this life cycle once of how you go ahead and create it, and then add the source of contact report following that. So let me go ahead and create a file for Henry Gonzalez, so for which I'll go ahead and click on the Matter button. And for simplicity's sake, let's just say stepping out of home. Okay. Now, if you actually start to look at the different compliance components that go into building all of the different documents that you have to build. If you've done the client intake, of course, you as a legal firm are now going to be concentrating on how you can retain this client, docket, disperse, and do everything that you can from a file perspective. But there are important pieces of information that you have to capture, important documents that you have to produce at the time of an audit, for example. And one such important document at that would be the source of contact document or report, okay? And once again, there you go. Right under document generation, we have what is called as a source of contact report. As I mentioned, this is not only a marketing report, this is also an equally important compliance report. I'm going to do this for the whole year. Now, as you capture the client intake form, we're going to show you how important it is for you to also capture that source of contact, okay? So you can see right away that we kind of give you a spread of where all you're getting your clients from, the referral sources, the different marketing events that's working for you. So you've got about 23% of your clients for the entire year through family sources. You've got about another 23% from your Facebook advertisement that you're spending. You've got about 6% from personal referral, which is something we added today. And you have about 7 non-categorized clients, okay? We, of course, provide you with all that information. So here, if you look at Andrew Milestone, we have no information other than his first name, last name. This is an important component of your practice management. As we continue to focus on other aspects of your business, right? How do you ensure your financial management capabilities are met? How are you getting audit ready for those components? It's also equally important for you to be aware of the expectation from the Law Society when it comes to managing client-related information as well. So if I were to search for Mr. Andrew Milestone, that report is going to give you a good audit, and you can do this end of the month, every quarter, at least definitely before the audit, to make sure that you've had the due diligence done of going and either inquiring or looking at, cast notes to know, how did this client come about? How could have he known me, right? And if you don't know, you're going to mention other, and you're going to say what was relevant. But it's important that you capture a tag that you can associate with. So let's say I'm going to go ahead and say it's an external referral. So this one report not only gives you the marketing aspect to it, but also gives you a piece of information that's relevant for you to capture as part of that audit document, of a client management audit document. Okay, and showing that auditor that here's all the different pieces of data that I'm capturing during a client intake process is going to be meaningful and important for you to showcase how closely you're following the needs and the compliance components. Okay. So let me go back to that matter. So you've done the client intake process right on the web browser. You've done your conflict search. And having gone through some basic information, you've determined that it's okay to go ahead and work with this specific client on a small claims matter. You also know how to generate that source of contact report, both from a marketing perspective as well as a law society requirement when you're being asked of it. And now, of course, we're going to move along to actually complete the file. So let me, for the purposes of the demo, I'm going to say initial meeting. And as important as it is that it's part of the file management, it's equally important that it's being captured based on the retainer and the agreement letter that you've signed with this specific client. For example, let's go ahead and say this is a billable time for about 1 hour at about $400 an hour. Let me just maybe change the rate to 150. So now you already have a certain projected balance. I'm going to add maybe another couple of events. Let me make this a $200 document review. Okay, just say I'm going to review the court forms. And let's say I do a final closure. This could have been a flat rate throughout, or could be a combination, whatever works. Now the logical next step is, of course, to go ahead and generate the invoice or the bill for this client. But what are some of the other steps that is required by the Law Society for you to make sure that you're connected with all the pieces of information regarding the client intake? So of course, the conflict search was important before you can understand if you can even move forward with creating a file for this specific client of yours. But other pieces of information that at some time within the life cycle of that matter that you capture on behalf of the client, as part of that client intake process right away, is the client ID verification, right? So taking a driver's license, and there's actually a Law Society compliant document that you fill out. And in our case, if you've given us the information, then we're able to give you that right away. You have Henry Gonzalez, you've got the mailing address filled out already, got the business address filled out. If there's a phone number, this is an editable document, so you can fill that out as well. You could say I actually got the driver's license as part of my validation of the client. And you may think, of course, you're not going to do this right away. And if you're trying to build a discipline, you could do this through that life cycle of that client management. Okay? And you can now make this as part of that file. Now, there's in fact a client intake form that the Law Society gives you as a template to fill out. I'm going to show that to you briefly, just so you have an understanding of the expectations from the Law Society. So here's a client intake form, which really gives you the opportunity to capture all of the information. So how did you get to hear about this? How did the client get to hear about you? It's a personal referral. What's the first name, last name? How have the court proceedings commenced, or have they already? So again, this is a editable document with all of your relevant information. If you already know this, that's awesome. If you didn't, then you heard it first here at a uLaw webinar. So client ID verification, of course, getting a scanned copy of the driver's license or a passport or whatever you feel fit as a way of capturing a government issued ID would be great. It's always a great supplement with that client verification. And there's, of course, the client intake form to fill out. Now, you can download these forms on the web, or you could just have them pre-populated once you've created the file, once you've determined that it's okay to create the file, and then generate these documents. That just makes more sense. Now, what you did was a conflict search. Now, what the Law Society would like for you is to now document and have available a conflict screening document, a report which says, tell me in detail as to why you determined that this client was not a conflict. Okay? They even capture who was the person taking the call, or who was the person who actually did that intake, right? So if it was not yourself, you can actually add whatever information is relevant. It captures, of course, your client's name, their mailing address. It also gives you the context of the matter itself. So you can see it's stepping out of home for a COVID situation. It gives you a file number, so there's a reference point for this specific conflict screening form. So you've actually determined there's no conflict. You're going to say potential client. Yes, it's a new client. And in the conflict search information is where you really have to justify as to why you determined as a law firm that it was totally okay to move forward with this client. You could say, and this is what we find most of our firms do, generated conflict search on practice management system, and there was no conflict. And now you attach that conflict search document that we generated out of uLaw, right, if you remember. There you go. So this was a conflict search document that we had generated for Henry Gonzalez. And as I mentioned, it is date stamped. So it does have the April 17th date stamp, and you can put that in there in that document as well. As per report generated on April 17th, 2020, document attached. And now you're done. Of course, as I mentioned, you as the legal person, based on the discipline that you have, based on the time that you have, will have to make a determination of when you generate these documents. Maybe this is done after the matter is completed as part of your file closure notes and file closure process. And that's something we've seen with other clients as well. When you're first getting started with the file, you're just focusing on getting the work done, getting your revenue, making sure that you're successful in winning that case for that client of yours. Of course, getting compliance and in line with the compliance is a secondary thought process, but even still, you now know the different expectations, even from a client intake process. Okay, that's really what this webinar is about, is to not necessarily educate you, but walk you through what the expectations were. Believe it or not, as part of the client intake process, it's also important for auditors to look at your retainer letter or engagement letter. Okay, so you may have different templates for various different types of matters, different areas of practice. And why is it important to have a retainer engagement letter more from a client intake process is making sure that you as a representative of the Law Society are doing what's respected and what's expected out of you as a professional to make sure that you have both your interests taken care of as well as the interest of the public and the client that you're serving. So a great example of that is, do you have a detailed payment plan as part of your retainer agreement? Do you have specific expectations out of retainer top-ups that have been clearly articulated in that retainer agreement that you sign with your client? Because if you don't have that, or if let's say you're going to be charging a certain interest if they don't pay your fees or your invoices in time, do you have that documented, right? So that's critical for you to then be able to follow up with that client. Let's say they had not paid you in time, and if you're going to, charge that interest, it better be in that agreement that you both have signed upon it and signed up to begin with. Okay, so you can personalize this. You can have your rates. You can have your signature. Have this printed. You can see Roger Moore already has his digital signature on this document. All you need to do is, of course, get Henry's signature on it. So the retainer agreement also becomes an important component of a client intake process. It's an important document, I would say, from both a client intake process as well as a file management process, but it's deemed to be a part of the client intake process. Okay. In addition to what, of course, the Law Society talks about, we also provide you with a checklist that you can be well aware of. This is also a potential file management, file closure process. Okay. So there you have it. You had about 5 different documents right after that client intake process, and whether you do it as part of that client intake right away or whether you do it towards the end of the file is something that's totally left to your style of working. I'll add to that list another document which I find quite often our clients use, and it's one of those situations that you do not expect, but it does happen, is the non-engagement letter. Let's say you did open this file, you did get started with working, and for whatever reason, it's unfortunate that you have to non-engage, either the law firm non-engaging the client or the other way around. It's important that you have templates available so that you can actually fill this out, and this is actually an obligation to the client and an obligation to the Law Society that you actually have a non-engagement letter readily available, that if things do happen, you have to non-engage, that you have that logical closure to that relationship and that file. Okay? So I'll reiterate, I know it's just definitely not my comfort zone today. I've just been put off because of the lack of internet being slow and things of that nature, and this is a different device that I'm using. I'm actually using a MacBook right now. I'm so much of a Windows user, but you can see it does work on MacBook. Client data verification, very important, along with a driver's license or a government ID being part of that file, part of the client intake process. Client intake document itself, which outlines how did you get to know this client, what piece of information have you captured about this client, documenting that and sharing that readily available. Conflict screening report, articulating to the Law Society the steps that you've taken to mitigate any conflicts or reporting that you did not find any conflicts to begin with. Very critical. And you support that with a document, which is the conflict search document that you generate out of your practice management system that can search the entire database for any existent evidence of that individual client that you just have taken into your system. An engagement or a retainer letter, once you've created the file, very important for you to articulate your obligations as a legal person representing the public and your client, as well as articulating the responsibilities of that client back to you as the representative of the law society. It's going to be asked. So you have 4 documents right away with its own supplement. And then, depending on the route that it takes, whether it's a non-engagement or if it's a completed file, you then have a closing letter which you can now append with your statement of activities, bill of cost, whatever is expected, or whatever you have, in fact. Now you have 6 to 7 documents through that life cycle of client management. Okay? All right. I know this is too much of information to consume. You probably thought, how come there are so many documents? But it is what it is. It is the expectation, and I think each and every document most certainly tells a story. The audit process is really, I believe, in my personal humble opinion, is a way for kind of a validation, if you will. It's really not an examination. It's more of a validation of, are you going down the right path? Do you have all the tools necessary to take you down that path? And how off are you from the path if you're not already on it? Right? So I think it's a great validation. Every new entrepreneur, lawyer, paralegal, as far as we know in Canada, most certainly gets audited, or used to be before the COVID situation, at least for about within the first 12 to 16 months of them opening a practice. Right? And there's often spot audits. There are often audits that they come back if certain pieces of information has not been produced the first time around, right? So being audit ready, having all those information not only helps you build a process and a discipline that helps your firm, it also helps with the audit process when it happens, right? So let's complete the whole cycle of this file. As you can see right away, it's invoice pending, and I will go ahead and generate an invoice, okay? In fact, let me go ahead and generate the invoice. I'll skip the pre-bill for purposes of time. Important pieces of information that the retainer letter also includes is important things such as, of course, your payment terms, your fee structure, the actual description of the work that's going to be done, expectations from your firm on behalf of your client, what you expect the client to do as part of that execution of that file. So, for example, if there are certain court visits that you are representing them, then you need to have the appropriate documents signed off. Or if you expect your client to be at court, then making sure that you let them know that it's their responsibility to be there in time. And this is one final document. As much as it is part of the file management, it's equally important as part of the client intake management process, right? Because this is exactly what you signed up for when you took that client and signed up that file. Generating invoices and delivering it on time is part of that responsibility. You can see clearly there's about a couple of dockets, clearly letting them know what the taxes implications were. So how much of a tax are you paying for this particular style? And of course, you can also include payment gateways so that the client can click on it and pay this at their own leisure, especially in today's day and age when electronic medium is very critical. The client can actually pay for this by clicking on this link. It takes you directly to a portal where they could provide the credit card information. Okay? Well, let's say you've done that. You've worked on that matter. You've done all the dockets. You generated the client information, and you moved on to another matter. And it's been a few weeks, and you come back to this Henry Gonzalez matter. You really want to have a quick glance of where this client information resides. What is the status of this client? At a click of a single button, which is the question mark, you pretty much have the insight that you need regarding everything that you need to know about this client. Okay? And you can do this right on your phone as well, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes. So not even without getting into even the file, you know right away that you've completed the generation of the invoice. That's how much the client owes you as far as what the bookkeeping system tells you, right? So either you've got the money, you've not informed the system, or you've not got the money at all. It tells you either one of these two stories. There you go. We have not received any funds as we know it best. That's the balance. No trust funds. That's important for you to know. Where this becomes important is not right away. It's not as soon as you've done the client intake. This is a very important piece of refresher or information once 2 to 3 weeks passes. So you can trust a system to be able to give you that refresher of your memory about that client when you go through this piece of information. It's certainly not when it's active and it's in your memory and it's fresh. Of course, then you're only focusing on that client. You're always focusing on the specific matter. This is more relevant, as I said, after time passes. Also tells you the total matters, because you may have multiple matters with a client. If you're working on real estate matters, you may actually have both the purchase and the sale of a home as part of the same client, in which case this would be a couple of matters, and there will be a total summary of the total trust involved, how much money went through trust, how much payments are still outstanding. So you know right away that $565 is owed by this client. You can go into further details that kind of gives you a Q&A, but let's skip that. So knowing that, one of the important things that you do is take a client payment. So maybe you're picking up the phone, calling this person. Right? You can even be in the matter. You can actually jump into the matter, make sure that, oh yeah, this was the multiple dockets at $150 rate, validate that. You could use this new button that allows you to go back to the client information. Right? You know right away what the phone number was if you had one. So let's assume you've actually called this person. Even without going into the matter, you can take that client payment right here. You don't even have to go into the matter. You can do it right from the client's perspective of what you're trying to do. And if you had multiple matters, that would be listed here. And that's what you should expect from any system, that it gives you the opportunity to apply a payment against that specific file for which it's being processed. Right? Let's say you go ahead and you say it's a full amount, they paid you with the check, and you're depositing it into your general account. And you're done. Okay? If I actually go back in that matter, you're going to see the status as no pending invoice. If you hit the question mark, you've actually got the payment in full. You can even generate a receipt, payment receipt. Now you think, why is there so much buzz around going through the whole life cycle? Because it all starts with the client, right? The client intake is the first step of them getting into your firm and the first step of the workflow. But almost every document that you generate is pertaining to a client and the client's file. And that's why it's important that at least you have a consistent way of representing the data back to the client as well as capturing data about that client. And to top it all, you're doing all of it with compliance in mind. So as you do this discipline day in and day out, compliance just is a very subliminal act that happens behind the scene, right? So there's that receipt, again, important as part of that process of managing the client information. So just as a quick recap, and I'm just going to switch after this, I'm going to switch gears into using a uLaw app, if you will. There's a quick question. Yes, this particular webinar is being recorded. We did have a bit of a late start at the beginning because of some technical difficulties. And again, thank you everyone for being so kind and generous in understanding. But yes, it is being recorded. It will be available to you on our YouTube channel as early as Monday. And that's something that we encourage and we request that you subscribe to, because every time a new video has been recorded, it's available on our YouTube channel. You get notified of it. Okay, so you don't even have to check on it. If you subscribe to uLawPractice, you get notified. Not a sales pitch, just saying that that's how our customers get notified. Alrighty. Quick recap before I move into my app. Client intake was our first step, was adding a new client. Basic pieces of information, including that source of contact, being able to show how that personal referral was able to provide this person as a contact referral. Basic correspondence address. You could have multiple addresses if you like. Even a phone number. So let's just put in a phone number. And we save this information. Soon after that client intake process, again, you could do a quick driver's license scan and have that readily available to make it part of the file. But let's say there's a phone conversation. As you're having that phone conversation, you can generate that conflict check to quickly ensure that there's no conflict. Imagine that, right? You're able to quickly generate that document while you have the client as you're capturing that information. Once you've determined a conflict, non-conflict situation, you're of course creating a file. And part of the Law Society compliance is to be able to generate these documents, starting with the client ID verification, client intake document, conflict screening, retainer letter or engagement letter, authorization letter. As I mentioned, in some cases where you have to represent the client themselves, you have the letter that gives you the authority to do that, as well as the logical closure documents such as the non-engagement and the closing letter. And each of these have supporting documents too. For the client ID verification, you have a government ID issued scan. For the client intake document, you either have the email coming from your web form or the phone conversation that you had. For the conflict screening document, you have the conflict check report. Right? So that really gives you a very thorough and a complete, I would say, readiness for audits. Of course, there was the invoice. That's also a client-facing document, a receipt client-facing document. And in terms of the overall schematics of what you do with the client from start to scratch, we've kind of gone through that now. So I'm going to try and hope this works as I transfer the control of the system, and bear with me as I do this, into my app that I have on my Android phone. And this is just another way of showcasing to you as to how you can actually do client intake in today's day and age, even on a app that's running on a phone. Okay? Alrighty, so I'm going to scan for Looks to me like I'm not going to be able to do that for today's webinar, only because I'm connected in the wrong system. But I will make sure I make that part of my demo webinar as I move forward. Oh, maybe I can. If you can just hold on for a second. Okay. So you should be able to see my screen right now. So I have my uLaw app. Oh, there you go. Oh, all right. So I'm going to log in into my uLaw app that I just downloaded from my App Store. And hopefully you're going to see this. I'm just putting in the same information that I put in when I logged in on the web, and I sign in, right? All right. So what you should see here is the list of all the client information. So if I went in and I searched up, what was the name of our client here? Henry Gonzalez with an S. You should see that information readily available. This was the client. This was the information. If you remember, right at the bottom, you even see the notes of it referred by your classmate, Robin, readily available right on your phone app. Okay? And how did I search for it? It was based on that little search that I have right at the top. I just typed in Henry Gonzalez. So I click on this specific client. You can see when it was created. You can see when it was last updated. All the basic piece of information that you need. Now, if I click on the question mark, the same piece of information that we had. Oh, there's a few others. There's a lot of people who want to present this slide share, so I'm going to avoid that. Total paid, $565. There's invoice balance. So I'm just swiping through this, okay? And if I click on the briefcase right at the center, it gives me all the information pertaining to this particular client. The dockets that I have, the different rates that I've used, and all the parties involved in this particular matter. That's very important. So if you actually have a landlord and tenant board matter, or let's say a criminal matter, and if there are multiple parties involved, it's easy for you to quickly click on the Parties tab, look at their information, even call them if you have to. So I'm going to click on the Parties tab so that you see this. So these are the additional parties. Okay? Right there. Events are all the dockets. So if you look at that particular flat rate, reviewed court forms, click on it, that's the information you have. Now, how do you do client intake? So we looked at that before. We did it through the web browser. I'm just going to leave you with this because I did take an extra 5 minutes to start, so I will go back. So I'm going to click on Contacts. Now, right at the top where you see this People button next to Clients, that's how you click a new client, and you have two options. Okay. Sorry, but someone's I guess, trying to take over my presenter control, so I'm just trying to avoid that. So when I go ahead and click on that People tab or button, it gives you the option to either import a contact or add a new contact. And I'm going to go ahead and click Add New Contact. And this gives me the same facility that I had when I did a client intake on the web browser. But the only added advantage that I have is that now I'm able to do that right on my app. Hopefully you're able to see this. There you go. So how did I get there? It has been one of those rough ride webinars this afternoon, with the internet being what it is in my house. I do apologize for that. So by clicking on the people icon, and hopefully you can see this, and clicking on Add New Contact as the option, you have the opportunity to type in the information. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say Larry Gonzalez. And you can just leave it at that. If that's all the information you have, let's say you met the person at a courthouse, and that's all the information you have, you can capture that right on the phone. Okay? So you may have missed that, so I'm going to add that, edit that, and add it to my webinar if you look at the recorded version later on. But that's all I had for today's webinar, to be honest, to be able to just show you that starting with that simple client intake process, the various other aspects and documents that are important for you to consider, both from a firm's logical next step process perspective, but more importantly, from the perspective of the compliance of what's expected out of you as a firm. Okay? So I think there's a bunch of questions. Let me see if I can answer all of them. Yes, today's webinar is being recorded and it would be available. And how you get the CPD is that the title to today's CPD is Contact Management. Okay, so if you log into your Law Society portal and type management, you should be able to accredit that for 1 hour of professionalism credits. Okay? No worries. Once again, it's been one of those one-off webinars. It's never been such a challenge for me in the past, but I do apologize if this was a bit iffy to begin with, and even at the end when I'm showing the app, some challenges with the internet. If you have further questions regarding the webinar, please do email us, and I'll see if I can. The name of the webinar is Contact Management. It's really up in our I believe it's on our uLawPractice webinar page. Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's Contact Management. That's the name of the session. No, yeah, absolutely. I think we have included that in our email, but if not, I will make sure that we ensure we add that into that. Perfect. We'll definitely take that feedback. All right, then. Thank you, everybody. Thank you once again, and stay safe. I'm sure we're going to get out of this real soon, keeping our prayers and our energy high. Stay safe, stay healthy, and look forward to seeing you in the next webinar next week. All right? Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you.